Hello, today we're looking at this one. It's Stephen King's The Dark Tower, Volume 1, The Gunslinger. So, yes, it's time at last for me to attempt to tackle the monumental mountain that is the Dark Tower series. 8 books all told, as far as I know, and I've got them all up there on my shelf. You can't see them, but it's a tower unto itself, which is almost touching the ceiling. I've read the first 2 books more than 10 years ago. I don't know how long ago it was. I read the first 2 and I absolutely loved them. I don't remember now why I didn't continue reading on at the time, but I think it might have been because I knew that the series wasn't complete. As far as I know, it is now, and I think it was completed in 2012, maybe. So I'm all up for it now. Thank you to my cousin Karen for putting me onto it. I know it's a very dear series to her, and I want to delve into it and see what she's on about. But judging by the first 2, what I remember of them, I'm in for quite a treat. So anyway, let's just talk about this copy that I've got first of all, before I start talking about the story itself. I'm just going to take off my hairband because it's about to flick off. So yes, this one, it's an old battered copy, 1989 print. So this was first published in 1982. So this is a fairly early edition of this book. My partner Vanessa got this from her previous work. They had a shelf with various oddments of books and whatnot, and you could give a bit of money to charity and take a book, and this is one of the ones she gave me. It's wonderfully aged. I absolutely love used books. I like to see a book that's been through the mill a bit, and this one's certainly been through it. It's not in bad condition. We've got a bit of foxing. I'm going to maybe show you some pictures here. Got some foxing to the bottom of the spine, which is quite delightful. At some point or other, you probably won't show up on a photograph, but it's been used as a coaster. So someone's left a cup of tea or coffee on there, which is absolute sacrilege. Occasionally I use a book as a ledge to put on my spectacles, but that's about it. Nothing that might tarnish the book itself, but saying that, it does add character. There's a bit of creasing, but if we look inside, there's a fair bit of marking going on, various debris going on there. I might be showing you to the side there, but we've got a dubious stain at the very beginning of the book. I've had a sniff of it, I will be honest. I don't think it's fecal matter, but it's something, perhaps a bit of food, a dollop of gravy, perhaps. But there's no vestige of smell anymore from that particular stain. There's another slightly dubious thing at the very end of it, but I won't mention that. I don't know what it is. We could possibly run DNA samples on it. It looks odd. But anyway, what I'm going to do is take a damn good sniff of it, of the book in general inside, and see what notes we can get from it. Okay, let's go. Yes, this is a fruity number. The very first thing I'm picking up is, as I'm an ex-smoker, I can detect the very finest trace of tobacco, and this has been in the house of a smoker that's uncouth enough to smoke within doors and to pollute their various books. Absolutely unforgivable, but it's quite a nice smell for me. I absolutely love the smell of tobacco. If I find someone smoking outside, I will follow behind them and take a sniff or two, just to remind myself that I was once a smoker and I'm no longer. But I still love the smell. Okay, so what else? Wait a minute. Let's just see if there's any other notes. It's musty. Oh, yeah, it's musty, all right. There's there's a must there. It's been in slightly damp confines. I'm gonna sniff directly on that patch now. This may cause me some harm. There's a sweetness to it. I think perhaps chocolate. Let's hope it was chocolate. Anyway, sorry. Hopefully you skipped ahead. I'm going to do that every time I read a book from now on because I like a good sniff. But the Dark Tower series that Vanessa got for me for my birthday, they're all, I asked her, I want them all to be used. And so they're all used versions in various states, but largely quite nicely preserved, but hopefully there'll be a veritable bonanza of various fragrances for me to partake of later on. Let's get down to the book itself. So, what should I do? I'll talk briefly about what it's about, just generally. So, we follow the whole of this book through the eyes of the Gunslinger, after which the book is named. He is a very mysterious fellow. I imagined straight away a Clint Eastwood type, so from those old Western films. He's got that kind of atmosphere about him, a brooding sensitivity about him, at the same time quite deadly, mysterious. Mysterious would probably be the main word to describe this chap. But we gradually, throughout the book, we learn various aspects about the way he is, although it doesn't ever fully touch upon that. That's something that's going to be explored as we go through the series, I imagine. But we do get glimpses of his past life. And it's really interesting how it's interspersed with the book itself, or the story, if you can call it a story. The main gist of it is that this book explains the fact that Roland Deschaines, I think that's his full name, Roland the Gunslinger, is in constant pursuit of the Dark Man. Now, this is a pursuit that, believe it or not, has been going on for 12 years. So he's been following this mysterious cloaked man for 12 years. And when we begin this book, in fact, it starts with a really nice line. I'll just read that. The very, very first sentence. The man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. There you go. That's the book in the nutshell. Sorry. God damn, I've just had a coffee and it's repeating. So yeah, it's a journey. This book is a journey. I love journey books. I mean, I love Lord of the Rings for that reason. I love journeys, fictitious journeys. And this one doesn't disappoint. The interesting thing is that this is an amalgamation of about 4 different genres, really. So we've got the Gunslinger, which is straight from a Western. Clint Eastwood, for sure. Definitely influenced that, I imagine. Then we've got the horror aspect. There's elements of horror that kind of appear throughout this book. And that's the main meat and 2 veg of Stephen King's normal output. We've also got a bit of high fantasy even. So if we go back to Roland's, the cutscenes to Roland's past, we find out that he grew up in what appears to be a very large castle, of all things. It's very odd juxtaposition of his past and what we later find him exploring the world through. And he's part of a kind of royalty, I think. His father is someone quite important, a gunslinger of some repute. And yes, we follow some of his early life and how his formative years, I suppose you could say, how he eventually got to become accepted as an apprentice in the gunslinging world. The other aspect of it is science fiction. Now, this is another strange confluence of things, really. So you've got, during this journey, he encounters various little things that suggest that the time they're living in, it has a distant past of high technology that actually supersedes what we have now. So I think the book is in sections. I think there's about 5 parts. And the second one is called the Way Station, I think. And so he encounters this lonely little building in the middle of a desert, and there's a water pump there. And it's powered by what he terms as he considers it probably is an atomic slug. So it's atomic powered. So it's a machine that's able to work forever, more or less, or over a very long period of time. So you've got all these different things appearing within the story that really, they start playing havoc with your noggin. But I absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved that. You never really know what's going on. There's even snippets of like an old song they used to sing, like when he was a child. He remembers Hey Jude. And it's obviously, a Beatles song. There's aspects of that as though our reality was part of that. So when I first read it, I thought is this our world, but in the far future, where things perhaps there's a nuclear war and we went back to feudal times, and there's these kind of little reminders of the world that once was, but I don't think it is that. There's a term that's used quite often in the book, the world's moved on. That's used a lot, as though there's an acceleration perhaps in time that is outpacing the normal order of things. So there's that, but it could also be used as a way of explaining the fact that there's been a civil war or some kind of overthrowing of power, and things are starting to degrade from that, a loss of order, perhaps, law and order. Apologies, I'm running out of breath. Yeah, so the other thing is that, unlike, I've said before, some Stephen King books can suffer from the blight of the waffle. Passages that are overwritten, perhaps, describing things that don't necessarily need to be described. This book is completely different to that. In fact, when I read this for the second time, I only finished last night, I thought to myself, it doesn't really read like a Stephen King novel. Because I've been reading quite a few of his recently. And this is a different voice. I would say it's closer to the stuff he was writing as Richard Bachman. It's more pared down. And his vocabulary is amazing in this. I encountered numerous words I've never really come across before. I looked them up. But also really poetic turns of phrase and really quite obtuse things. There's never any point in this book that you think, oh, I know what's going on. There's lots of suggestions that you don't know, you're never going to know, but it's infuriating in some ways, because there's little bits that lead you in one direction, and then you're led somewhere else, and then you get a machine that runs on an atomic slug, and then it just goes completely bonkers. There's demons and there's witches. It's really, really strange. I don't know if I've read anything quite like this before. Okay, so at a certain point in the book, another character appears, a young boy. And interestingly, so Roland meets him at this way station, which is, I think, supposed to be like an old coach station. It used to be on the highway, and since it's become a desert, but it's still there, and the water pump still works. So he finds the boy there, and this boy, as it transpires, he kind of, Roland hypnotizes him, and he finds out that this boy is actually from New York, and from our reality, it would seem, because Roland has no conception of cars, for example, and lots of the other things the boy talks about in this kind of trance state that he's in. So that was a really interesting part as well. And so then the boy then follows Roland. Him and the boy go off, carry on this adventure to get this dark man. I won't talk about the significance of the boy, because I don't fully understand it myself, but or what happens to him. But that's interesting in itself. The idea of this parallel universe. I don't want to talk too much about the book, this first one. I think as I read the other ones, I'll talk about them with spoilers included, because I assume that anyone watching those will have already read the books, and it will be more of a discussion of the books. This one I want to be more of a review, I suppose, or a recommendation, really. And I highly recommend it. Even if you're not a fan of Stephen King per se, I think you would probably quite enjoy this. It's a very unusual book. So he wrote this, or it was published in 1982, but it was, as I've later understood it, a number of kind of short stories that were later bolted together into this book. Now, he was initially, at the end, you always get an afterword at the end, usually with a Stephen King book, and he talks about how the story initially came about. So he was inspired by a poem that he read once when he was at university. Who is it by? Browning. It was from the mid-1800s, but it was concerning Roland. Roland Child, I think it was. So it was a kind of a dark romance, again describing quite dark, Gothic perhaps? No, probably isn't Gothic, but a dark, brooding romanticism, something like that. And so he was initially inspired by that, and then started writing this, I think, just a year later or something. But as he says in the afterword, it took him 12 years for this book to come to fruition. It then went on to spawn all these other books. And it's interesting because in the back of this edition, I know that in 2003, he updated this first book so to make it sit better with the books that followed. But this is the raw, the unedited edition. And I can see why you'd probably want to pull some strings to make it sit later on, because I was thinking, how the hell is this all going to be tied together? Okay, so just finally, I'll just talk a little bit more about Roland himself. I've had to chop this video up a bit because I kept running out, my brain was running dry. But I remember I wanted to talk a little bit about Roland himself. A really interesting character, and the more you learn about him, in a way, the less you know, really. He's quite an interesting chap. But he certainly epitomizes the Clint Eastwood character in that he is an amazing shot. So there's a scene early on in the book where a whole town turns against him because their minds have been messed by this dark man. And he's forced to just kill everyone. But the way it's described is so amazing. The way he's like reloading his guns like automatically. It's like his fingers know what to do. So I imagine at some point, when he was learning his trade with the guns, it was just drilled into him. So he's not even having to think about it, and he's firing and reloading so much that his fingertips are burning from taking the bullets out, putting them back in. Oh, really? That was an amazing scene. But there's something otherworldly or something magical about his ability. In fact, if we go back to the boy, and he hypnotizes the boy, he does it initially by not swinging a pendulum in front of his eyes, but dancing a bullet over his fingers in a kind of hypnotic way. I thought that was a lovely little scene, because it shows that he has a kind of a power about him that transcends mere physical bulletry. But it also impresses upon you his dexterity, his familiarity with those weapons and the bullets that are the currency that he's banging out of them. That was really good. There's too much to talk about in a way for such a small book. It's quite incredible. So yeah, I don't know if I mentioned actually. This will be the last thing. I may have already mentioned it. If not, I'll cut this out. But I probably have. It's just so annoying. The trouble is, I tried to record this a couple of other times, and then I can't remember what I talked about and what I did, what I didn't. So, one of the problems with Stephen King, certainly later Stephen King, is his tendency to waffle, just as I am now today. But yeah, I would highly, highly, highly recommend it. I think I said that I wouldn't give it 5 out of 5. See, I don't remember if I even talked about this. I think I would give this 4 to 4.5 out of 5. I hesitate to give it a 5 only because it does feel, after I heard that this is a number of parts that have been bolted together to form this book, it made sense in a way, because it's quite disjointed, other than the actual his obvious intention to make it quite difficult to follow. They do seem quite different in their own right. So it felt cheapened slightly that when I found that it had been bolted together in this way. Then the journey itself seemed like a device to thread these things together. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the only thing. It doesn't feel as though it was considered initially to be a book. It was always going to be something less and then grouped together to make something more, if that makes sense. Probably doesn't. And crikey, I've been talking for ages, so I'm going to have to edit the hell out of this. But there we are. That's what you get with these videos. Unfortunately, with me, I don't really have time to plan them. I have to just sit down, and then hopefully I just talk about what I know, what I've thought about while I was reading it. But it just means that it doesn't really flow very well often. But there we are. That's the way it is. I will read the second one next, but I think as the books go on, I'm going to intersperse these books with other ones, just so that I'm not reading the same thing on and on. But there we are. Yeah, so I'll be back soon with something else to talk about. Who knows what it will be? Who's actually watching to this point now? I mean, who watches these things? If you do watch them, you don't have to write anything at all, other than just say hello or something like that, just so I know there's people actually watching them. I'm still going to make them even if no one's watching them, but it would be nice to know someone's watched them. Anyway, let's leave it there. Thank you for watching, and cheerio. What a bloody